Want to introduce Scott Davis. Scott is a 2-decade veteran of the IT industry. It's kind of funny. Guys our age are starting to get some gray hairs on our face and on our head, and they're starting to come out of the ears a little bit more. That's why I wear headphones to cover up my ear hair. But it's interesting to talk to the kind of the guys in the middle of the road. Like, we're not old guys in the IT industry, but we're not the young guys either. So it's interesting because we're still kind of overlapping with both those age groups. But Scott's here today to talk about a couple different things, and as always, we want to focus on what this actually means to people that are operating small businesses. But Scott has spent the last 20 years of his life developing out his skill set in the area of compliance, like SOC 2, HIPPA, PCI-DSS. He is the current sitting president of the Cybersecurity Association of Pennsylvania, and we're really happy to have him here. So thanks for coming today, Scott.
Hey, Derek, thanks for having me.
So I would like you to kind of give us a simplified layman's term breakdown of what you feel the state of cybersecurity is as it relates to small business owners. So we're commonly using all these acronyms and statistics and things that mean a lot to us because we can see what they have. We can see what they mean from our side. But I wanted you to kind of just give an overview of what you feel, what your perspective is from a small business standpoint. What is the status of the state of cybersecurity?
Yeah, no, that's a very accurate question. I hear that a lot, especially as we're going around and talking to different groups, different organizations. And the state of cybersecurity, when I talk about it, I hit on a couple different areas of it. First is the overall employee gap. Right now in cybersecurity, there's about a 10-year gap between those that are graduating and businesses being able to hire experienced cybersecurity professionals. One of the missions of the Cybersecurity Association of Pennsylvania is to try to decrease that gap and bring that, employment gap down lower than that 10 years, because we're never going to catch up with it. Because next year there's going to be a higher demand and more demand on cybersecurity professionals. And the reality is we're not graduating enough people to get through it. So for small businesses, having a trusted partner, a managed service provider, a managed security service provider is becoming more and more of a critical need and a requirement, because you're not getting the expertise, unless you're extremely lucky in finding someone that loves your organization, to really join your team and have that 10 plus years of experience, have the knowledge and the know-how to actually do day to day. You can get that graduate that, hey, I passed the degrees, I passed this and that, but they don't have the experience. And they still have to go through and understand how help desk really works, understand how projects actually get done, understand all the different processes that are within technology. When we talk about technology anymore, technology really has become almost like the medical practice. Is probably the closest way that I can explain it. Because when you look at medical, you have your surgeons, you have your specialties, you have your pediatricians, you have this, you have that. And technology is becoming the same thing. You have your cybersecurity professionals. You still have your system and your network administrators. You have your cloud or Azure administrators. You're getting into infrastructure. You're getting into development, coding, programs. Like, technology is funneling similar to the medical industry. And that allows certain people to become specialists inside that tunnel. That only increases that employment gap, because now if we're saying, hey, we are 10 years behind in cybersecurity, and you have more people going into coding and development and, the game side of it, then, that employment gap isn't getting any better. The other aspect that I like talking about when we talk about the state of cybersecurity is we're not catching up. The hackers are still 3-4 steps ahead of us. We're not making the progress where we need to get. You look at the vendor space. Vendors come out with those shiny tools and, we think, oh, we need this because it solves the problem, because the sales guy's great. And kudos to the sales guy. But we can't just throw money into the problem. You have to do it strategically. You have to understand where your gaps are, where your risk analysis is. Understand what holes need patched. And not just say, okay, well, we're patching the hole, but understand how that affects the rest of your structure, how that impacts the rest of your infrastructure. The one example I think I used the most when COVID started, I started doing presentations for businesses across Pennsylvania over webinar. And the first question I always ask these IT professionals is your wireless network sitting on? And, of course it is. Why wouldn't it be? Well, no one's in the office. That penetrates through the exterior wall. Why is it still turned on? It's a vulnerability that you don't need. And when we look at the modern workforce, it's going to be extremely hard to go back 100% inside the walled gardens that we're used to as IT professionals. It's extremely difficult to go back to that. So this whole modern workforce of protecting your home computer, your at the office computer, your this environment, your that environment. And let's be honest, I could say I'm working at my home, but I could be sitting in a hotel in Mexico. And realistically, unless I turn off the filter, you don't know what my background is. So I think the state of cybersecurity as an overall is it's still extremely challenging. It's extremely challenging to find the right people to fit the right seats. It's extremely challenging to stay on top of what that latest threat is. And if you look at what ChatGPT and AI is doing, especially with ChatGPT version 4 that just rolled out or is rolling out, that's an extremely powerful tool that enables the script kiddies out there or those beginner hackers to really become experienced, because I can go in there and say, hey, I need a script to do this, and it's going to write it and give it back to me. And if it's not in a language I understand, I can say, hey, can you write it in PHP? Can you write it in .NET? And it transcribes that information. So the state of cybersecurity, I don't want to say it's scary, but it's critical that you have a trusted partner that you can trust to help guide you through that process.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up the topic of specialties. A lot of people that we talk to will come to us and say they need help with a certain aspect of their cybersecurity or their risk management, and they're coming out of a position where they thought that their IT admin who's been with them for 15 years, we thought he had us covered, and he really didn't. And we had a breach, and we weren't ready for it. And I'm always the guy who comes to the defense of the IT guy. We do a lot of co-managed stuff, right? I'm never the guy to say, well, this IT guy should have had that done, or even if it's another MSP, I never throw anybody under the bus, because what they were working on, what they were focused on for your company, they were probably doing a pretty good job at. But there's this vast array of things that need to be boxes that need to be checked, right? And areas that need to be understood and reviewed with the business owners and decision makers. And if your IT person, whether it's with an outsourced company or an internal employee, that one person is not going to have the time, the experience, or even the resources to get done what they need to get done to make sure all those boxes are checked. So, bringing in a team to handle that kind of stuff instead of having a person is definitely a big benefit. And then getting back to your 10-year gap, I mean, those specialties, the second you start to catch up a little bit with that 10-year gap where somebody is starting to figure something out, they're going to divert into another specialty. My wife is in the medical field, and a lot of people, the medical field is also suffering. But when they come out of school and they get into something, and then now you're starting to catch up a little bit, a lot of those people are diverting off into a specialty because they recognize a need. Mm-hmm. And then, the hackers being ahead, that is all being amplified by this 10-year gap. It's being amplified by the fact that you're dealing with people who don't have regular working business hours. They're in time zones spread all over the country. The commoditization of all of these tools and ransomware as a service and these hacker services where you can hire these people. And you don't even really have to be a hacker anymore to be a cyber criminal. What I want you to talk a little bit about is the social engineering aspect of this. And because you brought up the ChatGPT, we're going to talk about it, right? So when ChatGPT was rolling out, we were first using it for, policy writing, for, website content writing, for blog posts. I always joke, I can write an email that says, Derek angry, Derek no like this, and then drop it into ChatGPT, and it's this beautifully formatted, diplomatically worded email that comes out of it. But one of the things that I said at the very get-go is, these letters that you're getting or the emails that you're getting from a Nigerian prince who needs you to run over to the Western Union and help him commit wire fraud. Those letters are going to get a lot better because even the social engineering people are going to be using this AI just to write what looks to be an innocent email. So even with all the filters and the behavioral training they put into the AI to keep them from helping people commit fraud, it can still be used in a big way. So there's coding, the coding side of it to write a malicious script, or also the social engineering side to write really well worded emails to.
Yeah, so I think when we talk about social engineering, so many IT professionals out there teach it as the clicking method, looking for the email, looking for the action, looking for that. But we're not educating the history of social engineering. We're not educating that it's beyond an email click. Social engineering happens every day in your life. I think some of the first earliest examples of social engineering goes back to the Trojan horse. Hey, here's a gift. Here's a big old wooden horse. Come get it. Bring it into your kingdom. It's not a click. You actually pulled it. Like you had your army use their muscle, their strength to bring this, socially engineered present into your kingdom. And then once it's in, the attack happens. The Trojan horse mentality or the thought process is very true. And think how long ago that was before computers. I also talk a lot about, I'm a father of 3. I love my kids to death. My youngest is 3. He is learning social engineering in a different way right now. He understands that if we're shopping in a store and he wants something, he can throw himself on the floor or start screaming hysterically. And he knows that there's a threshold point that I'll get to that I'll buy him whatever he wants because I'm embarrassed. So he understands social engineering and understanding what he has to do to get what he wants because there's that embarrassment point. Social engineering is about emotions. Social engineering is relying on the emotional context and emotional feeling of the person to get them to do an action. It could be letting the Trojan horse into the kingdom. It could be grabbing the toy off the shelf and actually putting it in the cart. Or it could be clicking that link in the email. Why was social engineering so successful during COVID? The emotional need of people to understand what was happening and what was coming next. How many infections were in my neighborhood? Am I impacted or this and that? So when we talk about social engineering, that's really what we're talking about is the whole concept of the emotional attachment to getting the action derived that you're looking to get. When you bring in ChatGPT, now ChatGPT 3, extremely strong. The capability that had in processing what it processed and wrote the emails and the templates that it could do, it eliminated that, hey, the prince needed the money to help save his dad or whatever it was. And they're elegantly designed emails. They're elegant. They're designed right. There's no spelling errors. And you can't just rely on, look for the spelling error. Look for the mispronounced domain name. Look for this. Like the normal warning signs we've taught before are out the window. It's the emotional attachment. Whenever a natural disaster happens, whenever a crisis occurs, I always pushed out emails and recommend pushing emails out to your companies, to your organizations, to your employees, just highlighting the fact that, hey, this looks like it's from the Red Cross and they want you to donate by clicking this link. So if you click it, don't log into Microsoft 365. They don't need you to log in. But pay attention, especially after an emergency, after that disaster, because they understand the emotional connection. And we're not teaching the emotional connection. We're teaching the don't click it. Like, be afraid of every email. Just stop clicking it. We're not teaching the emotional connection. When we talk about ChatGPT, to go a little bit further into that, ChatGPT version 4 is rolling out right now, like I just said. I think that has 8 times more processing power with the number of words that you can process it in. I don't remember exactly. I was trying to, think about that in my head, but it has a lot more power, a lot more capability where you can feed a lot more data into it and actually get better results, more information. The other thing that just came out earlier this week is the developers behind ChatGPT have connected it to the limited internet. So they're actually now giving it internet functionality, internet search, internet research capability. So you can actually, if you're in that paid program aspect of it, start actually inquiring, and it can actually pull from different websites to help feed your information. So it's becoming more and more powerful. It's becoming more and more user friendly in a way that that cyber criminal or that wannabe cyber criminal can actually build a successful career utilizing the AI of ChatGPT to craft and draft what they're doing, using the emotional attachment that they're aware of in how to trick someone into doing what they want to do. And that's really where we get into it. So anytime you guys hear social engineering, stop thinking of it as just a click and really focus. It's the emotional attachment to get someone to do what you're looking for them to do.
Yeah. So a good example of social engineering is basically when you have a person sitting on an end user sitting at a computer who is reading an email, and the person who's sending that email is also text. We actually had one of our new employees got smished the other day, and that's the SMS version of phishing, right? So but essentially cyber criminals want to get somebody on the good guy end of the connection to do something fraudulent, do something illegal, do something to benefit the bad guy end, right? So a good example of that is if somebody wants to compromise a small business's email, they want to get into that email account. They want to watch the invoices that are being sent out or financial information that's going back and forth in and out of those mailboxes. Well, the way that wire fraud can happen is when your company sends out an invoice to a customer to get paid. We actually just had this happen to a local business who wasn't a customer of ours, but we heard about it through the grapevine, right? So their email was compromised. There was somebody watching their emails going in and out for some period of time. And when this company sent out an invoice, the bad guy, the hacker, followed up with another email to that customer and said, by the way, if you want to save 5% or whatever, you can wire the money to this address today. Now, they sort of stepped in, impersonated the company, had diverted the wire transfer, diverted the payment of $15,000 to another account. Well, how did that happen? How did that person get into this email illegitimately in the first place? And one of the ways that it happens, and most of the time the way it happens, is social engineering. So one of the ways that we help to train our customers at my company, the simulated phishing attacks are the most useful tool for this, because you can figure out what that emotional thing is that's going to make a person click, right? So they want to get in your email so they can watch for wire fraud. They can get into other social engineering. They can steal your list of customers, sell them on the dark web, steal whatever the data they can steal from you. But the way that happens is they gain access to your email in the first place. So what I will do, for example, we have a school that we manage. That the email that works really well for the school is find the local Domino's pizza, send an email with a picture of that local Domino's they've probably driven by before, and tell them Domino's is teaming up with Microsoft to give your classroom a free pizza. Click this link, log in with your Microsoft account, and redeem your coupon, right? Yep. So a bad guy will send out that information. An innocent employee who's just trying to get some pizza for her students because it's an emotional thing. They see an opportunity where they can help these kids, right? They want to get the free pizza. They click the link. They sign in with their Microsoft account. And now the bad guy has gathered their credentials. That's how the emails get compromised in the first place. And then it doesn't work. The page doesn't load and they forget it and go, oh, well, forget about it. They move on to the next thing in their day. And they completely forget about the fact that they just did this, right? So those compromises take anywhere between 120, once they've been breached, they can take anywhere from 120 to 240 days before anybody even realizes the email's been breached, statistically speaking, right? So, this is how people get into your email in the first place. You want to have those layers of protection where Number one, your people know not to click on those emails. Domino's is never going to ask for your Microsoft credentials. In fact, Microsoft isn't going to ask for your Microsoft credentials, right? Once you've trained somebody on doing that, you want to have phishing filters set up on your emails so those phishing emails don't hit the inbox. If something gets through and they do hit the inbox, then you want to have your people trained and ready and know not to give out their Microsoft password, right? But if they do accidentally give out their Microsoft password, that's why you want to have multi-factor authentication. That's where you can't just sign in with an email address and a password. You have to have another code texted to your phone or on an authenticator app or something like that. So it's about these layers of protection and making sure that this social engineering, brute force attacks, things like that. You want to protect against all of these things, because if you're protecting against one, it's like putting a fence up down one side of your property. The bad guy is going to see the fence, they're going to walk around it and go right in another way. So
another great example, the pizza story is a good one. Doing physical pen tests, social engineering isn't just, the click, the email, the electronic, like I used the Trojan horse example earlier, but it also could be physical. If someone knows that, hey, you're the law firm that's representing my ex-wife who I can't stand, I can call ahead and say, hey, I'm from the local internet service provider. We're detecting an issue with the modem. Scott from our tech team is going to be out in about 30 minutes. Just wanted to give you a call, a heads up that, he's coming and he's replacing this equipment. The amount of times that has worked, just to get in the door, oftentimes just being escorted right to the network closet without a question. But I've also done it with pizzas where I've shown up with 10 pizzas. It's like, hey, someone ordered 10 pizzas. Well, the receptionist isn't going to say, hey, let me grab those pizzas from you. No, they're going to open the door, show you where the break room is, which is oftentimes near or past where the network closet is, and just let you be. It's like, okay, well, I'm going back out. Do you need anything else? Nope, thanks for the pizza. It's like, I don't even know who ordered it. It's just you showed up with 10. I've done that I won't name companies or anything, but it was a data center for a healthcare firm. And I got right through the electric gate. I got into the data center building. I got through the receptionist into the secure area of the building. And the only thing between me and the data closet was one more keypad. So it is very real. The threat's there.
Well, I'll tell you, and just to kind of show how much I invest in what you're talking about, the social engineering, if you see, and I don't want to poo-poo on any MSPs anywhere, but case studies and customer testimonials scare the pee-waddlings out of me.
Yep.
Posting something on our website or a customer's website or anything, talking about how we handle their cybersecurity and the things that we've done for them or whatever, I do not share that information with anybody. So it is a kind of a struggle on the sales side when somebody asks you for a case study, right? We often won't provide any kind of information like that until a customer or a prospect has signed a non-disclosure agreement. Markings on vehicles. We don't have signs on any of our work vans. I don't put our company logo or our phone number on it. One, there's a liability of somebody just pulling out in front of your people and slamming on the brakes because they know you have insurance. But the second part of that is seeing that we're at the Three Stooges law firm down the street. It's called Dewey, Cheatham and Howe. Have you heard of that one? So if we're at the Dewey, Cheatham and Howe law firm and we've got our van sitting out front with our company lettering all over it, somebody who is trying to get at that law firm or get at their ex-wife who's hired them as her divorce attorney, right? They now know who the MSP is who's providing them with services. They now know who to target. They now know whose name to use when they call the organization to try to socially engineer them and say, hey, I'm so-and-so from XYZ IT corporation. We need to come in and check on one of your servers or whatever, right? So it's easy enough to get a shirt made, get something embroidered with your company logo and look really official when they go in there. So things like identity verification with our company, us knowing who they are when they call, them knowing that it's us for sure when we come in and train them on those sorts of things, and then never broadcasting who our customers are and who is providing them with services in the first place. Like if you're gonna talk about those things, you share them in a very private and protected manner.
100%.
So on the ChatGPT side, what do you think is going to be the next? I have a couple ideas myself, but what do you think is going to be the next development? What do you think business owners should be doing to protect themselves from new attacks, new types of social engineering, new crafty ways that people will be creeping up on them trying to steal their business?
I always say, remember the fundamentals. Don't forget where we came from, what we used to get here. Dropping a USB drive has such a high success rate because people are still curious what's on it. That emotional aspect of it. Continual education, absolutely. And remember, everyone learns in a different way. So you can't sit here and say everyone has to watch this video and, well, I can't stand videos. Like, give me something interactive. Give me something like that I'm going to enjoy. You have to educate in a wide array of methodologies to ensure that everyone understands the messaging. Continual education is critical, and people get annoyed by it. So there is a fine line, a balancing act with it, because you can't do too much training, because then like your people are going to be like, well, when am I going to work? You can't make me just do training, but having that continual training, that complete testing, simulated phishing emails, simulated text messages, simulated this, simulated that, gives people a different way of learning, gives people an opportunity to continue to educate it. Webinars like this, the amount of MSPs that are starting these podcasts, that are starting these webinars is great because it's an educational methodology. And everyone in technology is an educator. And it doesn't matter if you're the newest person on the team or if you're the most experienced person on the team. We're all educators because let's be honest, you can go through the schooling and you can learn a way to do something that may be faster than the most experienced person's been doing for 15, 20 years. It's if we close our minds and we refuse to listen to that other idea or shut it out immediately, then we're saying we're not prepared to continuing to learn. And technology, cybersecurity specifically, is a constant learning methodology where it never stops. Every day I learn something new. Every day I'm reading something else or, reading this or reading that. So you're never going to stop learning. As far as, beyond the basics, what can a business do to really protect yourself? Have a trusted partner and validate them. If you're not doing third-party pen tests or third-party audits of, what they're doing, then you're really only relying on the source of the matter. And I'm not going to sit here and say anything bad about my business. Why would I? But the amount of businesses, Exchange was my favorite thing. If I learned that you were running in-house Exchange, I knew you were going to become a partner. And it didn't matter how much money I put on that price tag per user. Because 98% of the time, technicians were afraid to update Exchange Server. I don't know what it is. Microsoft designed like the worst thing in the world or whatever, but people were afraid to upgrade it. So right by going to your online Exchange portal, which is public because you want your employees to access it wherever they are, I can open up, see the HTML, and know what version you're running. I can know what vulnerability level you're at. And all I have to do is go in and just say, hey, I see you're running in-house Exchange Server. You're 3 versions behind where you should be. So how often are they actually updating stuff? Well, they tell me they're updating it all the time. It's something as simple as that is enough just to question why you maintain that partnership, why you don't maintain the partnership. And updating firmware and patching things is, I think, one of the most fundamental things that a lot of people drop the ball with. Because it's not just updating your workstations and servers. It's updating the switches, updating the firewalls, updating the printers, updating the, all these other devices. And if you're a small MSP or a small person or that one-man band, you're not going to get to it. You don't have the time. You don't have the capacity. If you're that established partner that has the reputation, that has the trust in the community, that, hey, we understand the importance of this, and this is our schedule, and this is how we do it, and this is how we manage it, you know what? I have trust in you immediately. And if you're pointing it out to me, I know you're looking at it not just for me, but also for your current customers, because you're not going to point it out to me and then 3 months later have me in the same boat of, being now 6 versions behind, because you sold me on, hey, we're going to do this. We know how to do this. And it may be we're moving into 365 or whatever, because let's be honest, Exchange Server pretty much is dead. But there is still a use case for it. There is still organizations that I know that use it, and they love it because it's in-house and they have full control over it. So it goes back to the basics. It goes back to the fundamentals. Training is obviously ongoing, continual. Like, we have to stay in it. But also, for a business owner out there, don't just take the word of the person. Don't just say, I'm good with it. Actually ask the right questions. Actually understand what the partnership is. If you're a business owner, if you're utilizing someone as a VCIO or that virtual, executive services, make sure they're sitting at the table with you. Make sure that they're part of your business plan, because don't think of them as a partner. Think of them as a department inside your business, because that's what they're there for. They need to understand why they're there. And you have to have the trust that they're sitting at the same table, that you're talking about business processes. Because you know what? The amount of conversations I got into, it's like, well, in the board meeting, you mentioned that Sally was inputting the thing 3 times. Like, that's a horrible process. Like, we can use technology to fix that. Trust the partners that you have. Trust the good ones out there. And the ones that are good are doing things like this podcast. They're sitting here. They're showing you the education. They're bringing people in that are saying things that sometimes crosses the knots a little bit. That's like, you know what? We could do this a little bit better. But you know what? It's all education, and we're all continuing to grow.
Yeah, I've been preaching treat our team, everybody on our team, treat us like your team. Mm-hmm. And hey, you should bring us into your board meeting. You should bring us into your staff meeting. A couple of weeks ago, I had this conversation with a CEO and one of his vice presidents. I said, we should be in your staff meetings. You guys should include us more, right? We should be doing more than just a quarterly business review. If you guys are reviewing something, then we need to be in there too. And they said, well, we don't really talk about technology in those meetings. I said, exactly. You should be. This is a good place for that to happen, because if I can put one of my tech leadership members in your staff meeting and they can get a list right there of a dozen things with your 60 employees, a dozen things that have been annoying them, and jot that down on a new service ticket and walk out the door, call those people back, figure out everything that needs to be figured out, show them a better way to do it, redesign their workflow if necessary, and then move on from there. That's going to increase your productivity. That is where your ROI comes from on your technology, because the technology services are not about return on investment anymore. It's like health insurance, right? Hopefully your health insurance has a 0 return on investment. That's something that you have, that you pay for, that you do not want to use, right? It's the same thing with cybersecurity and the risk management and your cyber liability insurance. This is something that you're going to invest in to protect your business, and hopefully you never have to use it. But those lower end services, those granular services like help desk support and technical advisory and things like that, those are things that you should be using to increase your business's productivity and scalability. And the only way that happens is by talking with your provider. So if there's a place where your provider is not filling a gap, you can fill those gaps and still work with the same provider. If there's places where they're falling flat on their face, and you start asking questions and you start pulling the curtain back a little bit and there's some weaknesses there, now you've done your due diligence as a business owner or a business operator to know really what's going on with your company and really have a finger on the pulse. But so as we're wrapping up here, Scott, ChatGPT, what do you see the life cycle of this thing doing? Just out of my curiosity, I think my personal perspective is the AI is going to be really fun for like the next couple of years, and then we're going to have big problems.
Wow. It's only going to get better. It's only going to improve. I think the real power of it is going to be when the machine learning capability of it is simplified. Right now, teaching it is tedious, time consuming, and difficult. When you can get it to a point that the machine learning is simplified, that's game changer. And it's a game changer for you as an MSP. Being able to put AI into your ticketing system and being able to say, tell me every ticket that's taken more than 45 minutes to close. And, just asking those simple questions, it's able to say, I know all the data. And it's able to, spit that data back out. For businesses that work with a lot of data, absolutely, it's going to be game changing for you in a positive way because of the same thing. You can input the data, you can teach it how to read the data that you want it to read and how to transcribe what you're asking it. But once that's a simplified process and methodology, the power for businesses to excel and grow is tremendous. On the flip side of it, everything good has a consequence. It wasn't up until mid-January that they taught ChatGPT not to write ransomware scripts. And even when they first initially taught it, you could still say it was for test purposes only, and it would still spit out the script. Now, every methodology, every thought way I have in writing it, it doesn't write ransomware scripts anymore, but it was. So writing scripts that do harm, it has the capability and the power to do. Tying it into the internet, converting it from, where it was, and I think now it can process 20,000 words in a minute with ChatGPT version 4. Process 20,000 words in a minute. That's unheard of. A human being can't do that. So the intelligence level is going to increase. The thought process, how it analyzes information, how it spits the data back out. Again, for the bad side of it, your phishing emails, you can't look for spelling errors anymore because it doesn't exist. You can't say if it's in this language, don't worry about it because, all I have to do is say now convert this same message to Spanish and it's going to transcribe it into Spanish. So ChatGPT, there's pro and there's con. Just like anything out there, any tool that we implement, any tool that we deploy, look at it as what it's helping you do, but also understand that there is risks, that something with this power, there's great responsibility.
I think our timeline on the history of inventions is going to look something like the wheel, and then Johannes Gutenberg with the printing press, and then Al Gore with the internet. And then ChatGPT.
Yeah. And ChatGPT is not the only one out there. I mean, Google has their own. There's a couple out there that are pushing forward with it. And I think you're going to see more people entering this race because the first one that can figure out a way to simplify the learning aspect of it, that's where the money's going to be.
And don't count Google out because they weren't first to market, because Google has literally never been first to market with anything.
Yep.
Right. Google has always been a little bit behind everybody, but they come out and they kick everybody's butts on the backside of that development life cycle. Right. So they weren't the first search engine. They didn't. What was the big search engine everybody was using in the beginning?
What was it? Yahoo.
Well, Yahoo was big, but even before then, it was, I can't remember. But anyway.
Was that the Butler? Ask Jeeves?
Ask Jeeves. Ask Jeeves was huge. That was the big deal back then, right? How about Netscape Navigator?
Oh, wow.
Back in the day, right? So Google didn't have the first browser. They didn't have the first search engine. They didn't have any of that stuff first. It's not about being first to market for Google. It's about being best to market. And I think, while they may be a force for good or evil, and that's debatable at Google, no matter what their slogan is, the don't be evil thing, right? But I think no matter what, I think that whatever they come out with is going to be something big. And they're not gonna bring it to the forefront until they know they can do better than ChatGPT. So it'll definitely be interesting.
And ChatGPT, Microsoft is a large backer of it. Elon Musk, I think, in the early stages, put $100 million into it. So ChatGPT is not a small little player in the space, and they've they're showing that in the community around it. If you're in education, understanding that I could go in there and write a segment. It's like write a 500-word essay on Moby Dick. And it's like, oh, well, I want a 500-word essay on Moby Dick from the perspective of the whale. I can go in there and say, write a 500-word essay on Moby Dick from the perspective of the whale. And it understands the book, and it can do that. And the scary thing is, every time you hit enter and do it again, it's completely different. So it's not like it's giving the same answer. So as a teacher, you can sit there and say, you got that from ChatGPT, you got that from ChatGPT, because it's always different. And that's the uniqueness of it. That's going to pose challenges in the education space and in different industries as a whole. But it's definitely exciting to be on the forefront and see how this evolves.
Yeah, and you know what? Coming back to the whole podcast and webinar thing, what I tell people is if you really want to find an expert who can actually sit in front of another expert and have a conversation about it, right? So it's a really good way to kind of suss out who the actual experts are and who you can actually rely on, because just because somebody has 600 pages of content, well-written content on their website doesn't mean they wrote it. What do they actually know? So if I'm a college professor or even an elementary school teacher that's got a book report on Moby Dick, all of a sudden your book report is going to turn into a oral report with maybe a few questions and answers during that oral report presentation, right? So let's see if you really did read the book and really do know about it. So, but I appreciate you in helping us further that effort on our end, and really nice to meet you, Scott. And hopefully we'll be talking again soon.
Looking forward to it.
Have a great day, sir. Thank you.
Cheers.